Hello friends, History Bros, welcome to the Han Xiongnu War series. After we covered the rise of Modu Sanyu and the Xiongnu Empire, this time we are going to turn our attention southwards to look at the rise of the Han Dynasty from being a tributary state of the Xiongnu into a worthy challenger to its colossal northern neighbor. Here is a quick recap. As the Xiongnu Empire rose and reached a great height it had never seen before under Modu Sanyu, the Han Empire just emerged out of the ashes of a devastating power struggle that ensued after the collapse of Qin, the previous dynasty. Liu Bang, the founder of the Han Empire, was defeated and thoroughly humiliated by Modu at the Battle of Baideng. But being a peasant-born scamp, Liu Bang had no pride to begin with. So instead of seeking revenge, he sought a path of survival, and he managed to broker a peace deal by giving the Xiongnu his proverbial lunch money. He signed a marriage alliance with them known as Heqin. As part of the deal, the Han Empire was required to deliver regular tributes in the form of silk, gold, foodstuff, and also to marry off their royal women to the Xiongnu nobles. The idea was to civilize the Xiongnu so that they would stop raiding. So did that do the trick? No! They just kept raiding, albeit at a smaller scale. Emboldened by their superior position, when Liu Bang died, Modu even sent a mocking letter to the widowed Empress Lu, offering to marry her and cure her loneliness. Boy, was she livid when she received the letter. But all the ministers were just too scared of the Xiongnu and argued against starting a war with them. In 177 BCE, after a raid by the Xiongnu Empire's Tuqi, wise king of the right, Emperor Wen, the fifth emperor of Han, could only raise a mild protest regarding the incident. Just to explain how the Xiongnu hierarchy worked, the absolute ruler of the Xiongnu Empire was the Shan Yu, but under him are two autonomous kings, the Tuqi, or wise king of the left and right, who usually just do whatever they want, unless the Shan Yu tell them otherwise. They were located in the east and west respectively. Just imagine a southward-facing orientation to make it easy to remember. When the reply from the Xiongnu arrived, it was really just a humble-bragging letter from Modu. Yeah, the wise king of the right was being very naughty. So as punishment, I sent him to the west to terminate the Yuezi and conquer the Wusun, Rouran, and the other tribes. And just so you know, the Xiongnu Empire is now officially the biggest empire in the world. You know what? Let's continue being friends, the emperor replied. Okay, it looks like they are not going to stop raiding anytime soon. But on another note, how did the civilizing process go? Well, there was a hitch. During one of the Heqin exchanges, when a member of a royal family was married off, a very reluctant eunuch was sent along with the bride. His name was Zonghang Yue. He really didn't want to go to live among the Xiongnu in the boondocks. If you send me away, then I promise I will become Han Dynasty's worst nightmare. He was still sent away, and he kept his promise. Over there at the Xiongnu side, he ingratiated himself to Modu's son, the new Shan Yu. He improved the Xiongnu bureaucracy and preached the superiority of Xiongnu culture, thus becoming the first Xiongnuabu in history. What need do we have for silk? They tear easily and they are not even as good as the hide and leather the Xiongnu wear. They probably find him quite cringy because silk was still a very expensive item that they can sell somewhere else for a good price. But at least he is on their side, and the Xiongnu can be quite generous when it comes to rewarding individuals who impressed them. Those stingy Han imperialists only sent a fifth of their goods here. How dare they? If Zonghang Yue's complaint, which was written in the records, can be believed, then a fifth of Han Dynasty's income is a massive amount of resources they are giving away to the Xiongnu for nothing. So this raises the question, how was Han Dynasty doing at this time? With this kind of economic burden, are they even okay? Surprisingly, they are doing really well. They made a lot of economic reforms and became quite rich, entering their golden age even. So that's why they would rather keep their heads down and quietly make their cha-ching. Liu Bang was born a peasant, and his policies favored the peasants too. However, wealth and power gradually shifted towards the noble elites. Besides the widening inequality, it also created the danger of internal instability. In fact, the Han Dynasty had experienced two political upheavals before Han Wudi's time. The first one was the Lü clan disturbance, when Empress Lü, Liu Bang's wife's relatives, tried to seize power in 180 BCE, and the rebellion of the Seven States in 154 BCE, when other members of the Liu royal family rebelled against the emperor. Han Wudi finally entered the picture in 141 BCE and became the seventh emperor of the Han Dynasty. His personal name was Liu Ce, but he was better known by his ancestral name, Han Wudi. So I will just call him that. Anyway, there was obviously something exceptional about him, because he became the crown prince despite not being the eldest son. He was only 15 or 16 according to East Asian age reckoning when he became emperor. What, does he look old for a 16-year-old? Well, you would imagine that he would probably look that old already, with all the pressure to fix the current state of the empire weighing on his shoulder. But Han Wudi hit the ground running. The first thing he needed to do was to rein in the nobles and centralize the government. So on the first year of his rule, this teenager enacted a series of reforms, which became known as the Jianyuan reforms. Impressed by the essay of Confucian scholar Dong Zhongsu, he made Confucianism the official philosophy and banned other ideas. He sought to regulate the aristocrats' power and excesses, and to build his own power base, he promoted the recruitment of talented commoners into the government. This last reform would be the precursor of the imperial examination system in China. The point is, he needed to build a loyal support base so that his plans and policies won't be detracted. Like this one. This ambitious reform was smacked down right off the bat by his own grandmother, Empress Dowager Dou. If you think that old white men are good at clinging onto power, then you have never heard of old Asian amas. They are forces of nature, I tell you. As easy as flipping her palm, she dashed his plans and executed his ministers. She had a hand at making the empire prosperous. She is not about to let this young whippersnapper ruin everything she and her extended family had worked for. His reforms will never see the light of day while she is alive. So Han Wudi was politically neutered for the first few years of his rule, and this move had made him so much enemies, he was practically public enemy number one in his own court. They even tried to depose him with whatever reason they could find, including accusing him of being infertile and not producing an heir. So he secretly built his power base. He recruited and promoted promising young officials to become part of his faction, his inner court, so that he can one day challenge the old guards who he considered to be the outer court. As he was counting the seconds until his grandma kicks the bucket, Han Wudi still had to adhere to the terms of Heqin. He married off another relative to the Shan Yu and paid his tribute. But the Xiongnu never stopped their raids. The ministers' constant refrain was that they were just too weak and war was just too costly. However, the threat of Xiongnu had never left his mind. Then, one day, in 138 BCE, they managed to extract intel from a Xiongnu prisoner of war and learned about the survival of the Yuezi tribe that was Xiongnu's greatest enemy. This is great news. They could launch a pincer attack on the Xiongnu if they could just form an alliance with the Yuezi. And to do so, he just needed a volunteer to travel across the perilous enemy-infested steppes to find them. And among all of his ministers, only Zhang Qian was brave or foolish enough to step forward. So off he went with 100 other men and a Xiongnu slave who served as his guide. But this poor sap didn't know what he signed up for. His mission will end up being an epic 13 years adventure. But that's a story for another episode in the series. And then, an interesting event happened down south in the same year. The kingdom of Dongou requested intervention against the kingdom of Minyue's invasion. The ministers argued whether they should interfere in the Yue people's affairs. But the interventionist camp won, and Han Wudi sent them support. The Minyue army surrendered without a fight, and promptly left once they found out that the Han army was coming. So, yay! Mini victory! Unbeknownst to him, this small, seemingly independent action will eventually lead to the conquest of the South. But that's a story for a different episode too. A few years later, the Han Empire finally saw some real action when the Minyue attacked Nanyue, and the latter requested Han to intervene. So they did. And perhaps for the first time in a very long time, the Han army tasted victory. Oh my gosh, we are not complete wimps! And boy, they can't get the sweet taste of victory out of their mind. On the same year, the Empress Dowager Dou passed away. Finally, Han Wudi could carry out his long-awaited reforms. And now, with everything falling into place, he started to entertain this wild idea that's been brewing in the back of his mind for a while. Maybe it is time to finally challenge the Xiongnu. No. Zhang Qian had not even returned yet, and the Xiongnu was still a force to be reckoned with. Now, if only there is a brilliant way to launch a surprise attack. Then a merchant called Nie Yi came up with a brilliant idea. And then what happened next was Nie Yi running off to the San Yu requesting protection. He had become a fugitive of the Han Empire, he said. And in exchange for the Shan Yu's protection, he was willing to kill the local magistrate of Ma Yi and offer the city to him. That sounded like a pretty good deal to the Shan Yu, so he agreed. But not long after the San Yu entered the territory, he started to smell something fishy. Everything seemed to be going too smoothly. Too impossibly silky smooth. In fact, he even saw fields of cattle without even a herder watching it. So the suspicious San Yu captured a minor officer and interrogated him. And this one officer spilled all the beans and ruined the whole operation. He told the Xiongnu that there were actually 300,000 Han soldiers hiding all around, who were ready to ambush and encircle him at a moment's notice. Shocked by this revelation, the Shan Yu immediately retreated with his whole force. He was so grateful for the information, he actually gave the officer the rank of Heavenly King. Wang Hui, the general in charge of the operation, was supposed to pursue the Xiongnu with his small contingent of 30,000. But seeing that there were still 100,000 Xiongnu on the opposing side, he decided not to. Hey, look! I saved 30,000 troops from complete annihilation. That should count for something, right? Well, Han Wudi didn't think so, and he was jailed. So the first operation against the Xiongnu was a complete botch-up. But there can be no backseas in war. And this incident was a clear indicator to both sides that the age of meek diplomacy had ended. And this incident marked the official beginning of the centuries-long Han-Xiongnu War. So on the next episode, we are going to go into the actual war and take a look at the Han military and the fabulously quirky generals who fought it. So subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss the episode. And here's a warm thank you to our latest bros, Philip Lam and Saint Mercurius. If you would like to suggest and vote on future topics, then be a bro and join us on Patreon. Until next time, stay cool, my bros.